Hello, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today. Could someone just put in the chat box that you can hear me okay? Type it. I can hear you okay. Loud and clear. Thank you, Mandy. I appreciate that. So I'll be going through the chat questions from time to time, kind of answering them as I'm able to, but also in respect of your guys' time and to make sure that we make through the whole lesson. Much like at YTT, we're gonna try and kind of cover these ideas. And it's certainly, if you have any personal questions or questions regarding something that you need tech support with or anything regarding your training or anything like that, just shoot me an email. I'm probably not going to be as quick with emails same day as I normally am. So probably maybe a couple days on replies for things just while I work this know out. Home Finder, Home Finder. If you need a new home, check out Home Finder. Hello. Okay, so as I was saying, feel free to type in your chat, your questions. Periodically, I'll go through and check them. Please don't feel unloved if I don't look at it or answer it or acknowledge it. My first priority really is to, one, have this go smoothly without the internet going out, and two, be able to get through all of the lessons. So I know some of you have gotten the 8 limbs of yoga lessons in the past, and just kind of a reminder, I'm always making jokes that this isn't a romantic comedy, and some people study these ideas their whole life, and I know that every time I go to training I learn something new. So it's not so much about like checking a box or saying, yeah, I got 8 limbs, that I'm all set on that one. The idea on the syllabus is to present and represent it a number of times. For the idea of, one, we're going to receive the information. Maybe this is your first time, maybe it's not. Then for the next step, it might be consider and ponder and do something with the information. How can you put this information into an action step, if you will? And then in the 300-hour level, for those of you that are on this call for the 300-hour level, it would be to teach it back. So that's kind of essentially what we're up to here. So with no further ado, let me just make sure I don't have anybody else waiting to be admitted that's locked out or anything like that. Everybody is in. I want to thank you guys for your flexibility and understanding on this. This was a tough one for me. I wasn't completely sure whether or not we should do this or we shouldn't do this, but I think that to probably play it safe, like, hey, why not? So anyway, I will start off with what we're up to is little doodly for you. The 8 Limbs of Yoga, hosted by Michelle Ray Selby, RYS, owner, Edge School. That's me. Okay, so let's get into it. 8 Limbs of Yoga. The 8 Limbs of Yoga, coined by Patanjali, are Yamas, Niyamas, Asanas, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Tirana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. These slides are listed in the chat here, and they're also in Teachable. And I think I may have included them in the email with a link to where they are in Teachable, so that I don't want you to worry about stressing out about taking a ton of notes. You certainly can if you want to, but you don't have to. So with that, these 8 limbs of yoga, each of them play a valuable role in the life of the yogi. And this is an article that I had found that I thought was really good from Yoga Journal. And I tend to go to Yoga Journal for my resources because I know that they have the resources to fact check their news and make sure that it's credible for people and that you're getting valuable information. So we want to make sure that happens. So do that. Moving on, so the history of the limbs and where this all came from. If you look to the Yoga Sutras by Patanjali, he outlines 8 limbs of yoga, or Ashtanga yoga. And just to kind of point out, sometimes if you go to a gym and you see what kind of yoga, what style of yoga, it might say Ashtanga yoga, and that refers to, generally speaking, more of a an end result of the asana base. So, like if you're in Warrior One, you're not really in Warrior One until it looks like this. It's sort of that approach a little bit. So this is more a matter of language changing over time through history, as people do. And so, tomato, tomato, different meanings for different things. In this case, this is not what we are referring to. This is Ashtanga as far as the 8 limbs of yoga goes. And it translates to Ashta, means 8, Anga means limb. It's said that Lord Shiva shared yoga with seven sages. Shared yoga with seven sages, the Sapta Rishis. So these rishis were like seers back in the day, and sages were the people that would get yoga teacher training. So you didn't like find about yoga teacher training on Facebook and sign up with Michelle online or anything else like that. Like a sage would take you under their wing and a source of mentorship. And this is more of what went on. And not everybody was included in yoga teacher training at that point. Certainly much more mentorship driven, which would drive some of the recent changes to Yoga Alliance, why we're trying to come back to a little bit more of a mentorship based kind of thing. Let's see. They then created 7 different schools of yoga, which were passed down through history to create hundreds of different forms of yoga. So this would be considered yoga styles. So we have gentle yoga, we have, restorative yoga, prenatal yoga, all these different sorts. We have branded yoga. I created Corex Yoga. That program was nominated for an award at a convention, SCW Fitness Mania in Rosemont a couple of years ago. I was pretty excited about that. And essentially that style of yoga and the style of yoga that I largely teach you is a core-based yoga, in that we find a way to find our movement to come through the strength of the core, as Joseph Pilates had suggested, but the emphasis on the actual asana themselves is yogic in nature, in that it's breath centered. So we want a breath centered approach. That's certainly Kamenos lessons that he shares, is how to teach a breath centered class. Inhale into this, exhale into that, so on. Moving on. Patanjali composed the Yoga Sutras as a composite of these various traditions. And so at some point, somebody had to write everything down. And there were found some time ago palm leaves with writings and teachings on the palm leaves. And that was actually pretty cool to be able to see that kind of history. Hold on, we have someone jumping in. Welcome, welcome. To see that kind of history being written on palm leaves, and to see like what went down, what were their thoughts of the people, what were they trying to share. And I guess the palm leaves were the Facebook social media posts at the time, right? Like what the people talked about, the forum in which they use, a platform that they shared ideas on. And so it would then be left to Patanjali to write the sutras and put these ideas together and make them a part of history. So great stuff. Years later, a couple thousand years ago, written, still applicable today. All right, so let's get down to the nitty gritty and talk about the yamas. So yamas literally translates to restraints, and it addresses personal behavior. So, when we're interacting with people, I know one thing that I've always worked towards is not getting excited about sharing my message and interrupting somebody. I'm just working in the direction of like everybody else here, right? Like, so try and without judgment, but with love in your heart, kind of consider, where are you when it comes to interacting with your community, and then work on it, right? That's all we can do. The yamas are, the first is ahimsa, and this is non-harming. So we talk about non-harming, like don't kill a bug, things like that. But it can also be harmful thoughts, right? Whereas like, oh, this is how I do it, and that's how she does it. And in a way, that's violating ahimsa. So we want to consider that. Even if she does do it that way and it is wrong, we want to then look at satya, which is truthfulness, which comes second to ahimsa. And they're meant to stack, in that we observe ahimsa before we observe satya. And the idea there is, we may have a truth, which for the record is really only our truth anyway, but we may have a truth, and then that truth in turn comes through my lens and is shared. But if it violates ahimsa and is harming to another person, then we would want to refrain from sharing that. And so again, we hear this pattern of restraint. Next is asteya, which is non-stealing, like don't hijack a car. But it's also can be other things. It can be stealing time. I reference in YTT sometimes about running late. We're stealing time. If we have an appointment to meet our friend or coffee and we're always running late, even our friend's understanding is still stealing their time that they could be doing something else rather than this. So time is a big one. Attention is another, right? And experience is another. I'm sure many of you guys have seen like the TED talk about like when somebody is saying, oh, this is my experience and this just happened. And then they tell their story. And then the reply is, oh, well, that happened to me too. That's actually, some would say, in line with stealing time. And so hold on, we have an amendment. Welcome, welcome. Okay, so stealing time. We want to make sure that we're not stealing time. Okay, so next step is brahmacharya, which is non-access. This one's a really big one. I feel like most of the trouble that people get into is in regards to excess. We have too much of this or too much of that or whatever it is, even too much of yoga. People that check out of dealing with things they may be going through or problems they might be having, they don't want to experience it, so therefore they just go to a bunch of yoga classes. So like nothing's exempt. There's no good or bad in what we do. But I do feel that excess gets most folks in trouble. So that's something that I certainly try and keep an eye on. And a parigraha, which is non-possessiveness. And that is, one nice example would be, say, students, right? Like as teachers, we develop a rapport with our students, and over time, we might find that our students are going to other classes, and we may feel a whole array of feelings. And the idea then would be that this is non-possessiveness. We don't own any students. We don't own people, hopefully, right? And allowing any relationship or thing or scenario, whatever it may be, to come with some non-possessiveness, and just kind of taking the hands off the wheel a little bit can go a long way. All right. So when we talk about ahimsa, not harming, so avoiding harsh words, actions, and thoughts towards yourself and those around you. So one little habit I picked up is whenever I pass a mirror, I go out of my way to try and observe something that I like and say something nice about myself, because I caught myself passing a mirror and saying, oh, this, like, oh my gosh, I've not washed my hair, or whatever it might be. And I think that we find what we look for. So if we're intending to look for the flaws in our person, then we are going to see them with the spotlight. So try and be loving with yourselves, try and be loving with others. A big piece of this lesson, I feel, is the should could analogy, where if you write a list of things that people should do, this person should do this, that person should do that, and so on, and then cross out the word should and replace it with could, it's really nice. So whatever your example is my dog should not chew my bathroom rug anymore, right? So, but when I change it to my dog could not chew my bathroom rug anymore, it takes the charge out of it a little bit. That's what it does, kind of on a subconscious level, through the tool of language, which is a really, really powerful tool. So just kind of keep these things in mind. So if somebody sets you off or does something, or if you do something, you're beating yourself up and you're having a hard time with ahimsa, then, maybe do the should could exercise where you sit down and you write down all the things that should have been, and then change it to all the things that could have been. And when you're done with this exercise, it's a really nice takeaway. In my experience, it does a job almost 9 out of 10 of taking charge out of something. Okay, so next piece of yamas is sacha. Truthfulness. Honesty is the best policy. So yes, I can be honest. Yes, I can be forward. I feel like it's my responsibility as a teacher to do that. But first and foremost, I need to observe non-harming. So if something I'm saying is harmful, then I probably want to back out of that line of thinking and move away from it. And honestly, is honesty the best policy? And I think I would probably say my truth is not the end all be truth anyway. It's just my truth, right? When we all kind of see things in different lenses. I saw a really neat show on Netflix, and it was like the mind observed or something. Emma Stone narrates it, so you can look at that. And she's talking about how the mind works, and specifically regarding memories, that within 1 year, the likelihood of memories being accurate, like very accurate, is very, very, very low. But when you ask people what their memories are, they're very, very confident that that's exactly what happened. So there's just like a interesting little task for you guys to spend some time on if you'd like. All right, so next up is daily life asteya, non-stealing. Obviously, don't steal materials things, but also attention, time, and energy. So a big piece of this is taking ownership of this, and this would be setting up boundaries so that this doesn't happen as much. So for me, I have boundaries, and I grappled with them for a long time. And like, one is I don't really want to talk on the phone any more than I already have to. So I already have to talk on the phone maybe 2 hours a day, possibly three sometimes. And I find I'm an introvert. I'm an extroverted introvert, but I'm still an introvert. So that means those kind of exchanges can be very, very depleting for me. So for me, in order to stay energized and to meet my goals and to do the things that I want to do, I work much better in the written form. So this might mean that I have to share with my people, like, I'm sorry, I don't really do phone calls, but if you're really dedicated to a voice conversation, then you can leave me a voice WhatsApp. And then, when my clock time to go back to work goes on, then I can listen to that WhatsApp and I can reply with a voice app, those kind of creative solutions. I think that the saying, it is what it is, concerns me a little bit. And that, when we say it is what it is, it can imply that we don't have any power. We give our power away. So if I'm on the phone 10 hours a day, that's because I didn't put any boundaries in place. I didn't say, I'm sorry, I don't really do phone calls. This is why. And I could do phone calls, but I choose not to. Some feel I should, but I could, and I won't, and that's okay. I'm on the phone as much as I want to be. And so finding other modalities to communicate with people is how I've set boundaries up for this example. And I invite you to find yours. And the best way to figure out what they are is to see where you depleted consistently, not so much just with any given person, but where are you consistently feeling depleted, and where are you feeling refreshed and renewed. So after I create something like this slideshow and I send out emails and everything, I feel very energized. Whereas if I get on the phone and I'm on the phone for an hour or 2 hours before yoga teacher training, I feel very depleted. And so you want to look for those clues for yourself, and you want to make sure that other people observe them, and by whatever means, making sure that you make that clear. Next life, daily life, brahmacharya, non-access. Initially known as celibacy. Can't say that that's a good sell here in the States in modern days. So maybe we make this more about being faithful to our partner and respectful in all of our relationships. So non-access can start to mix in with some of the other limbs, and you're going to see an overlapping, a fabric, if you will, and that's intentional, I believe, or at least it appears to be. So parigraha, non-possessiveness, working toward generosity and love and avoiding greed and envy. I think greed and envy just gets us in trouble. If you feel envious of other people, maybe I invite you to try and just be happy for them. And then over time, your natural default place might more readily be being happy for them. And that's really, I think, where it's at. And that's where joy is. So being inside greed or envy doesn't really serve anyone. Very rarely does it ever serve the relationships at hand, and things of this nature. So keep that in mind, if you will. Niyamas. Okay, so let's go to the next. Literally translates to observances and addresses the self-perception. So now we're going to go inward. Tougher work than going outward. Hard to look in sometimes. The first is satya, or purity. This is a word that pops up in almost every organized religion historically that I know of, and I do like to study the different world religions to see how they're similar rather than different. But anyway, this purity of thought, if we think clean thoughts, and that can mean whatever you want that to mean, and whatever you take away from that. Santosha, contentment, and this is a big one because I'm a doer. I'm definitely a doer. I'm super driven. I'm goal oriented for sure. And about 6 months ago, I had a shift, and it was, how much do you need? You know, like how much more? It was for my own example, to give you an example to work with here that's tangible is, I considered franchising. I'm like, oh, I'll franchise the studio and this is what I'll do. And then those of you that know me know that I'm definitely not really a detail oriented person. I'm definitely a broad strokes person. And franchising is detail oriented work. I mean, that's up there with like wedding planning. Nothing about that sounds good to me. So at what point do we decide, hey, you know what? I've built this thing. I love this thing. I believe I'm just going to nurture and take care of this thing and be content with what we have. And quite a bit of joy can be found there. I will tell you, I find most days I'm within a state of joy because I'm content. It's lovely. At one point I had yoga mats and people could have whatever word imprinted up top they wanted, and I'd place the order for them for that. I'm not an affiliate, but I probably should be. But it was nice. So whatever word means something to you, put that somewhere, write that on a piece of paper and put it on a mirror or something that you see each day, in your car or whatever. Tapas, self-discipline. This one's is a really big one coming off of Mercury retrograde. I do understand with the tides and the effects of the stars and what's going on around us and how it affects our tides and being composed mostly of water, that we're definitely impacted on some level. But I will tell you, being in this profession, how many people tell me they can't work on their goals right now because Mercury's in retrograde. And I can't help but feel like maybe some self-discipline needs to be examined, doing the work. I mean, I can tell you, creating these slides, my wrists hurt, my fingers hurt, my back was a little leggy. I was on the computer for hours trying to come up with a solution that would work for everybody. But, we need to do the work, that heat, that tapas, that heat. That's what comes along with what it is that we want. So if you're not getting what you want and you're not reaching your goals, or you don't know what your goals are, then rather than putting that upon anybody else, understand this topic falls under Yamas, and that falls under self-perception and observances of oneself. So I hope that aids you. Next up is Svadhyaya. This is my favorite one, self-study. I love this. I think we can get lost in self-study. I think this also can fall underneath the brahmacharya of non-access for sure. But I do think it's really important to know, like, what are our triggers? What brings us joy? How do we want to spend our time? What do these things look like, so that we can build a life structure that supports those things. So that self-study piece, that's a big deal. And again, ahimsa comes first. So non-harming, don't beat ourselves up about this self-study process, but do take some time and look inward, like, hey, what about this is the common denominator always me for an outcome with all these different people? I mean, I don't know that it's always, oh, I attract this type of person sometimes, but I think that oftentimes we can look to self-study to get quite a bit of work done. Ishvara Pranadana, surrender. This one's hard. Oh gosh, this one's hard. I'm really dedicated to the tapas piece. I'm really dedicated to doing my work and finding alignment with how I spend my time so I can reach my goals. So when it comes time to say, yeah, that didn't work, right? Surrender. And let's say, this Zoom could be a really good example of surrender, in that if it didn't work, it didn't work. But, hey, we don't know until we try. We got to try things out. And then after that, we kind of got to give it up a little bit and let it go. And that's a big piece of that surrender thing. And I do believe Entangled enjoys joy, contentment, surrender, truthfully. And we can find all those things with gratitude based on where we are. But before we surrender, because Mercury is in retrograde, we want to make sure that we've done our work through our tapas, like we talked about. All right. So next up is Sacha, purity. We talked about this a little bit. Maintain cleanliness physically, mentally, and emotionally. And so one example could be multitasking. So if you have 50 browsers open on your computer, um, close some, right? Like get it down to under 5. And then if you can get it down to under 2, that would be really good, because there becomes an emotional clutter when we just have so muchness everywhere. So if your house is really messy, I mean, I used to be a slob. If you open up my closet for decades, there'd be a pile of clothes there. And my solution to this was just have enough clothes that I only had to do laundry once a month or something like that. And then that is how I lived, that's what I did. And it looked clean to people coming in, but it wasn't. And then when it was time to do laundry, I have like 20 loads of laundry to do. It's like 3 days worth of laundry. So there is actual cleanliness in your physical space that they suggest, they being the authorities on the topic, they suggest that what's happening in your environment is happening in your mind, and what's happening in your mind is happening in your environment. So yeah, kind of clean it up a little bit. Clean it up a little bit if you can. All right, Santosha, contentment. So let's build on those ideas a little bit. So practicing gratitude, being content with yourself, what you have and where you are. So how many of us have ever felt like, oh gosh, if only I could lose 10 pounds, I'd be just right then. And then we do lose 10 pounds and only 5 more. Or the other side of it, I think that it's a little easier to see. And that is, if you've always thought in your mind, oh, if I was only 10 pounds thinner, then I challenge you, homework, to go back through your old news feed, your memories in Facebook or wherever it is you've got them, your pictures, and see every few years if you might have been 10 pounds thinner 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, 30 years ago. I don't want to be telling about my age here, but I got a few decades under my belt. And I can tell you, I've always felt like, oh, if I could just a little more discipline, stop eating dairy. I'm gonna hit the gym one more day a week than I currently do. I'm gonna take strength training. Like there's always something that I'm looking to do that can bring me to the next best body. And the truth is, there has to be a moment that you are content with yourself as is. And this one is definitely a topic that is on the news and people are talking about right now, body image and things along these lines. And I believe that it falls here in the 8 limbs of yoga. 2,000 years later, we're still talking about the same thing, just different examples, right? I would say, though, that we want to be mindful of our cholesterol levels and vitamin deficiency through poor diets. And, I know Jim Carrey had a really great quote floating around recently talking about depression, about how we want to set the stage to give ourselves the best chance. And that include exercise, yoga, meditation, good diet, clean thoughts, not stewing, things like that. So giving yourself the best stage to work from, the best platform to work from. So be content with yourself, with what you have and where you are. So that next best thing, where am I going to be next? Like, what am I going to get to next? And so professionally, as I've progressed, I was a yoga teacher. And then if I could only just be a yoga teacher at a studio, and then if I could be a yoga teacher at a studio downtown Naperville, and then once I got that, then it was like, well, maybe if I create a training, I'm going to create a training. And then after that, and so on, if I can present at a fitness convention, if I can be featured, if I can be nominated top influencers in Glancer magazine, like at what point is it enough? Is it enough? And I think that for me, the meme that pops up is less hustle, more alignment. And I think that's really where this piece can be found. Spend your energy and time, do your work. Those tapas that you have to do the work. Yes, you have to do the work, but be selective. right? And then also understand when enough is enough and only do what brings you joy. I really am quite good at bringing joy into my life by following these practices. I can tell you it works. And where you are right now. Right now, it's March and it's not that cold, and I'm pretty happy about that. I was relieved this winter that it wasn't that cold. We had a cold bout in February, and I really thought, oh, I don't want to be here. Maybe I can build my whole business online. Maybe I can Zoom one day. So now here we are, we're Zooming, right? I could do this from anywhere. But my family's here and I have the community here. And so there's these other things. So where are you? Whether it be physically, emotionally, mentally, in a relationship, you can fill in the blank all day long on that idea. All right, tapas. Coming back around this one, my favorite. So that self-discipline, we need to avoid shortcuts, enjoy the journey of life. So we want to do the work, but we also want to enjoy the journey of life and enjoy the fruits of one's labor, which I kind of touched on a moment ago. So you can start to see the overlapping of these ideas. Definitely coming into that self-discipline piece, we're going to want to keep an eye on that. Svadhyaya, that self-study. Know, accept, and love yourself. I mean, this one stands on its own. You have to know yourself, you have to accept yourself, and you have to love yourself. Or you could know yourself, you could accept yourself, and you could love yourself, right? Or you should. Which is it? So we want to do our work, and then if after that we've done everything that we can do, and this is where we are, then we accept where we are. I was surprised to learn I was an extroverted introvert. I didn't actually know that. I went to all these conventions in the fall and I learned this. I thought I was an extrovert. I'm not. And as I understand myself more deeply, and understanding being like in crowds and things like that can be very draining, where something like this is very energizing for me. It's nice to know that, because then you can set your life up to complement who you are, rather than try to change who you are to meet expectations of yourself, your others, your industry, whatever it may be. And I think that we are now at a time of enlightenment on that topic, which is delightful. Ashvara Pranidhana, surrender. So this could be devotion. It could be to God, if you see that, or simply to your practice. It could really be to anything. It could be to the universe. But at a certain point, I feel the loneliness that practitioners often describe they feel has more to do with burdening themselves with the end-all be-all solutions, rather than kind of giving it up. Like, okay, this one I'm going to have to give up. And that's where that contentment piece comes back in, right? Things might not be ideal. Maybe there's some shoulds going on. Try and change those over to coulds. Find that joy and let it go, right? Let that go. All right, so let's talk about daily life, the role of the 8 limbs. What roles do the asanas play in the 8 limbs of yoga? Asana, the physical practice. It prepares the body for meditation. So this was initially the idea. The idea of the asana, the postures, the poses. I like the word postures better than poses. Physical expressions is nice, but nobody really knows what that means. I like postures better than poses for some reason. There's I think an underlying theme there that suggests, I don't know, runway model or something. Anyway, the idea of the asana was to prepare the body for meditation. And it is the only outward, physical, clearly actionable limb of yoga. That's a big deal. If you think about it, like nothing else can you record, can you checklist, can you say, oh yeah, here's evidence that I've done this thing, right? Everything else is somewhat inward except this. And I wonder if this is why people commonly consider yoga as asana and vice versa. It's because that's the piece we see and we don't see the other pieces as much. Asana is just as important as the other 7 limbs, and asana is no more important than the other 7 limbs. I think different practitioners will have different meanings and attachments to it, but as far as the 8 limb path goes, which the whole idea is to move a practitioner towards enlightenment or bliss or joy, whatever you look at there, the whole idea is to find is define that journey. And asanas is simply one piece of the journey. Okay. In modern times, asana, through the third lens, is the first one that people are introduced to. One may say that it is the gateway through with modern yogis and yoginis. You like that? Yogis and yoginis. And discover the philosophical and spiritual heart of the practice of yoga. So it is true. Like Edge, we bring in people just looking to get some movement going, maybe de-stress a little bit, maybe tap into their breath, get a little break and rest. They definitely like the ambiance of the room, so that can't be skipped. You know, the lights down, the music on, the fireplace is lit, the essential oils are going, all of these things really allow, I think, our practitioners to feel like they're coming in to release and be pampered, and then from there do their work and hold space. So this gateway is pretty impressive, and as people go through the different weeks, months, days, years of practicing, oftentimes they start to look to the other modalities. This is certainly something I've witnessed in yoga teacher training, that people come to training maybe to enhance their personal practice and leave on a spiritual path. I mean, it's really quite cool to see. So, all right, asanas. So we literally translate that word to take a seat. So if you come over to my home and I say, take an asana, because that A is actually silent, but that's not usually how we hear it. So for the interest of language, we say asana. Take an asana, it means just have a seat. It doesn't mean take a headstand, it means have a seat. So physical postures include, but are not limited to, we have a neutral, which would be like a mountain, twists, say Amrichi's twist, inversions, a downward facing dog, where the head comes below the heart. Lateral bends are like side bends, back bends, think wheel, or even think cow, right? Doesn't have to be as extreme as wheel. And forward folds, which for me, I find very grounding. So each one of these postures do something different for the practitioner, and we want to consider that when we're putting together a well-rounded class. So generally speaking, in our manual, I emphasize the trying to touch on the different movements of the spine when putting together class programming, without too much emphasis on ones that maybe folks aren't as accustomed to, you know, specifically those back bends, you wouldn't want too much of it. Some contraindications, understanding and knowing those, that can be found in the required reading of the Yoga Anatomy book. So you look up the asana, you look it out in the anatomy, you find out what's going on, you see what the contraindications are. You know, folks with blood pressure issues, high blood pressure and such, should be careful with the inversions. Not to say they can't do the inversion, but maybe they don't do as an extreme an inversion or spend as long of time in that inversion. So there's that. Pranayama. Literally, prana is life force or breath. So didn't know that, now you do. Prana is life force or breath. Yama is restraint. Though one could also break the word into prana and ayama, which translates to extend and draw out, like to draw the breath out or to restrain, right? And that's what we're doing with our breath work in pranayama. So control of the breath or breath extensions, the practice of consciously controlling the breath, right? Like, do we stop and think about how we're breathing? That's such a lovely exercise. That's my go-to for stress. Whenever I'm feeling overwhelmed or stressed or run down, I just shut down all the other stuff, and we'll talk about that one next. And I bring my awareness to my breath, and then I'm more centered and grounded. It really works for me. I recommend it. The practice of consciously controlling the breath, which leads to improved concentration, health, focus, clarity, creativity, and purpose. And I could not agree more. Like, if I can find stillness in some time, I can create endlessly. It's really quite nice. Having done that for about 3 years, I started getting stronger in the art of Pratyahara. With Pratyahara, it literally translates prati meaning away or against, and hara meaning food or anything we take from the outside to the inside. So anything we bring in, right? So if we can take out anything that we're bringing in, that's pratyahara. Many translate it as sense withdrawal or withdrawal of the senses, control and senses of the like. So kind of dancing around this idea a little bit, sharing, expanding some things that people say, common misconceptions about this. This is not that we're shutting off our mind and we're not allowing thought in. That's not what this is. It's more of a concentrated choice to divert our attention away from something that is otherwise bringing our attention. And at that time, then our attention away maybe from something that we're more passionate about. I think of recent late, we have our new neighbors in our plaza next door, and there's the construction, right? There's construction, and that's great. These two gals are building their hopes and dreams. We're gonna have a nail salon and a hair place. I can get my hair done over there and a pedicure. Who doesn't need a pedicure as yoga, right? Like, and by the way, P.S. I do take a break from the nail polish 6 months out of the year and just have my toenails buffed. Fun facts to minimize toxicity. Anyway, I digress. So because of the construction next door, it might be tempting for a practitioner to find themselves paying attention to that noise and not what's happening within their body. So the skill of clearing that out, and it starts really with not being frustrated by it, surrender, there's construction. So once you surrender it, it makes it less personal, it helps take the charge away. And then once there, it's much easier to say, okay, I think that I'm just gonna choose breath work instead and bring my awareness to presence. And that's really served me probably more than any of the other ones so far. So Pratyahara bonus slides in here. Getting good at this. Pratyahara can be viewed as the bridge between the external practices of the first 4 limbs of the internal practices of the following 3 limbs. So there's a difference here. Like as you start, I wouldn't want to use the word master, but move towards mastery of Pratyahara, you're going to see these other limbs start to show up in your life. And this is lovely. We'll talk about what they are. With this practice, we draw our senses inward, bringing our attention to that which lies within instead of the outside world. Can go a long way in pain management. Tirana. Tirana literally translates to concentration. However, a deeper translation refers to binding of the mind to one place, object, or idea. So it's a very singular thing. We're not void of thought. We've chosen one thing to zoom in on, if you will. This largely is what's going on in yoga studios around town, more than actual meditation. Concentration really is. So examples could be like an image or a TT. Internal, we could zoom in on our chakras. We could do like a chakra guided meditation. Those last 3 limbs are referred to as sanyam, control, and it is said that they are to be practiced collectively. Practicing Tirana will bring you to dhyana, which is the next limb. Each limb, as you can see, prepares you for the next one, which will lead you to samadhi, respectively. It is achieved when the yogi is able to focus solely on the object of concentration. So we kind of talked about this a little bit. We talked about moving the body and wringing it out in asana, right? And then after that, we talked about the breath work and finding some stillness and just concentrating on the breath, which is really big and trendy right now for something that's been going on for so long. Like just concentrate on your breath and everything will be fine, right? To Pratyahara, where we're withdrawing from our senses a little bit and we're choosing how we're going to zoom in, right? And now we're on Tirana, and that frees our mind up to be able to concentrate on something, right? So like I like the gong quite a bit, so I'll play the gong. So my practitioners will listen to the gong. It gives their mind something to do. So the monkeys of the mind that frolic about, especially during meditation, or practitioners that say, I don't want to meditate, I can't meditate, meditating's awful, anything like that, that's okay. Just pick something else, like an activity-based thing, and just work on concentration. And you might be there the whole rest of your life, and that's perfectly fine. That's a lovely place to be. So with that, then, dhyana. So let's really talk about what meditation is. We don't have a ton of this happening in studios right now, as far as I can see. Literally translates to meditation, appreciation, and attention. However, while used interchangeably with meditation, dhyana refers to the state of being achieved through meditation. give you a minute on that, where Tirana brings the mind to focus on a single point. So we are moving outside of cognitive attention on, say, gong sounds, and we're moving towards a single focus of clarity that isn't absent of thought. It's quite concentrated thought. It's very, very zoomed in, clear thought. And there's a big difference between the two, and we'll talk about those, but I want to leave some time for Q&A too. Let's see, where was I? Dhyana is achieved when the yogi is so immersed in meditation that it ceases to attach itself from the act of meditating. So oftentimes when we're in meditation, we're like, I'm meditating right now. I'm doing a great job. I'm getting a little chilly. Next thing I'll bring my own blanket. Oh, I like the smell of the lavender in the room. I wonder what those oils are. Like these thoughts, like I'm paying attention to meditation. We're actually moving even away from that, the observance. So it's cool though, as we move as an observer to our life. And if you've not experienced that, I invite you to it. Try to tap into being an observer of your life. Like, look at that. Noted, right? Noted. And no judgment, just noted. Okay. Attached self, addict. Okay, where the action of concentration and focus has disintegrated, and what is left is the state of dhyana. So it's after you peel those layers of the onion away. It is the merging with the object of concentration. Here we start to become one. You know, it's fun facts. Some organized religion do not endorse meditation because I'm told that it can open up a portal because we're not thinking. So the misconception being, well, because you're not thinking, you're leaving yourself in a place of attack of evildoers, I guess. I don't know. And so Google that if you're interested in that. But one takeaway might be, you might have a practitioner saying, oh yeah, I can't do it. You know, this is why, it's according to my religion and so on. And we need to respect that. We're not going to talk anybody out of anything. It's not our job to do that as teachers. But I do think that it's important to know that this does exist and this is a thing, so that we can let our practitioners know that no, we're not going absent of thought. We're going into precise clarity. And those are two very different ideas. So explore that a little bit and how you might share such an idea if you were faced with that kind of objection. Samadhi, bliss, joy, literally translated to putting together, integration, or absorption. It is also considered a state of bliss. It's the culmination of all of the limbs that precede it. So really, I mean, all that other work needs to be done before we hit samadhi. We're not hitting samadhi without the other stuff. Even if your asana piece is a comfortable cross-legged pose, it doesn't matter which asana it is, right? But just the incorporation of the physical self within the process, right? Considering it on that level. It is said that while in the state of samadhi, the practitioner cannot see anything but the oneness between self and anything else, as though the subject and the object are one. How lovely. Like, so for folks that experience any kind of loneliness, and so many people do, this is beautiful. There's a oneness there. You know, I like to reference the redwood forests. Google that. If you don't know what they are in California, the trees, there's a whole network of trees, and above the surface, they're just trees, but below the surface, there's this whole living organism that connects them as one. They're one living system. It's really cool. Check it out. Okay, next up, Samadhi Bonus. Can Samadhi be achieved without death? I think the best argument I ever heard on this one was, there's so many distractions in life. I don't know how you could reach it without death. There's that. Do the distractions of life prevent it? Which is this question. And is it possible that samadhi could be achieved in varying degrees? I mean, that would be my own philosophies. You're free to choose yours, of course. Everything I know about life and in existence and science and stuff is things are cyclical, and there's not just one end all be all of anything, really. So it makes sense to me that there would be different degrees of samadhi, and perhaps death would bring a different level of it. I don't know. I can't prove that one to you because I'm here Zooming right now. Daily life. So your homework is to reflect on how the yamas and niyamas can affect your life experience, where normally I would not collect these assignments in our classroom experience because we're Zooming. I ask that you do please publish them by April 15th. If that date stresses you out, then just shoot me an email and let me know. But otherwise, take some time while it's a little bit fresh in your mind and put pen to paper, and you can go into Teachable and there's directions on how to submit work through Dropbox through those links there. I do know that it might take a moment for you to acclimate yourself to how to do that, but it's pretty simple. I try and pick the most simple platforms to work with. So with that being said, I'm going to unmute everybody.
I'm going to go lay down with you. Come on.
You are. So if anyone has any background noise, if we could mute those, that would be good. Okay, so questions, and everything's open, so everyone's free to chat.